Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more.
Welcome to Compass Points, a podcast about Knoxville and Knox County government, politics, business, education, and just about anything else that grabs our attention. I'm Scott Barker, the editor of Compass, and Compass is a subscription-based website and newsletter where we report on all that stuff and more. You can find us at CompassKnox.com, joined remotely today by Compass co-founder Jesse Mayshar. Jesse, how are things going where you are?
They're delightful here. I'm in New Orleans, and it's like 65 degrees and sunny, so it's been a bit of a nice change from the last couple of weeks of ice and cold we had there in Knoxville.
Oh, absolutely. And this is the first week we don't have Snowmageddon in the forecast. So
yeah.
And speaking of weather, we're recording this in the opulent studios of Barbarian Productions with Lord Seth Barber, our esteemed producer, and he usually gives us the 3-day-old weather forecast now. So what's going on, Seth?
Well, I mean, it's a beautiful sunny day today. The kids are in school finally. Get through the whole week to get to the weekend, and then we just throw one quick day here at the end. They'll actually go to school. So I guess, I don't know. We'll see. I guess the lesson learned from the last couple of weeks here in Knoxville is it doesn't matter what the forecast is. So I'll say that I'm as good at it as anybody else. I can give you the 3-day forecast as good as anybody else can. So
there you go. Yeah, it was funny because one of the things that Superintendent John Riswick will say is that Knox County Schools is an urban, suburban, and rural district, and it was really evident this week because the city streets were absolutely clear. There was no problem inside the city limits, but I'm sure it was much worse in places out in the county, some of the more rural areas. So they, out of an abundance of caution, did not have school until Friday. So anyway, there was more than just no school that happened during the week. We're going to be talking about several things. A couple of bills by a state representative, Gino Bulso, kind of culture warrior bills during the legislature. AMR, the ambulance provider, had some big news over the week. Governor Bill Lee gave his State of the State address, and in which he talked about his signature voucher program. But we'll start out also talking about schools. The school board met finally a special session on Thursday to vote on a provision dealing with a lawsuit that has been brought by Wilberforce Academy. Wilberforce Academy is it's a wannabe school. It's not a school yet, and but it's they want to open an overtly Christian charter school. And charter schools are public schools. They're they receive public funding, and traditionally, legally, religious schools can't get public money, but they want it, and there's a Tennessee state law does not allow religious charter schools, but they are suing the Knox County School Board. Don't know why they're suing the Knox County School Board actually, but we'll get into that in a minute. But the law department had suggested that the school board ask the state education commissioner to weigh in on this and basically either grant or deny a waiver for Wilberforce Academy. And So the school board met to discuss whether to ask Lizette Reynolds, who is the education commissioner, to do just that. The interesting thing that happened, I mean, this is just a strange lawsuit because the school board hasn't actually acted on an application from Wilberforce. Wilberforce sent them a letter in November, I believe, saying that they wanted to apply, they intended to apply, and then they just filed the lawsuit, and they never did apply. The deadline was this week, and they never applied. So the school board hasn't acted, one way or another on the application because there is no application. And but if that's not confusing enough, the executive director of Wilberforce Academy is Zach Wishart. Zach Wishart is also a principal of a Christian school in Knox County, and he is the campaign manager for school board member Betsy Henderson, who is running for Knox County mayor, and he's the campaign manager for school board member Steve Triplett. And so that kind of created a conflict there in that meeting on Thursday. And the upshot was the board ended up not approving the request to ask Reynolds about a waiver. The one of the interesting things was that Ann Templeton drove home this point several times, and others did too, that asking the law department, why are we doing their work? If Wilberforce wants a waiver, they can ask for a waiver. We don't. It's we shouldn't be getting involved in that. Gary Dupler, who's the deputy law director who handles the school board business, said that he thought that would asking for the waiver either way would strengthen the legal case. It's kind of unclear. And I don't know, Jesse, you and I both have covered numerous lawsuits, and what I don't understand about this is why Wilberforce is suing Knox County, because Knox County hasn't acted. There's no damage.
I mean, it seems like their reasoning is that because under state law, if you want to open a charter school, you have to make initial application to your local school board. Then if it's denied at the local board level, you can appeal it to the state and it becomes a state decision. But because that first level of application is to the school board, I guess that's why they're suing the school board. The school board is bound by state law. I mean,
yeah.
School systems in Tennessee are essentially treated as divisions of state government. And so the school board facing a state law that says you cannot have a religiously oriented charter school and an application from a school that says they want to open just that. Like, the school board doesn't have any discretion there at all. They have to deny this, or they would have to deny it if they actually filed an application, which, like you said, they haven't done yet. And I think that's one important part of this whole picture. Like, we've talked about this suit before, that the real aim of it seems to be to get, they're not trying to open this school, at least not right now. What they're trying to do, and they're represented by this well-connected, very conservative activist law firm, they want to get this case into the court system. They want to get it up to the Supreme Court. There's a feeling that our current Supreme Court might be ready to say not only that states can use public money to support explicitly religious instruction, which we are already doing through our voucher program that pays tuition at private Christian schools and other religious schools. But also, they're looking for a decision that says if a state has charter schools, they have to allow those to be religiously oriented. So it's another step toward full public funding of explicitly religious schools. And that's what they're really trying to do with this. They're kind of going through the motions of like saying, it's almost like they're saying, let's pretend. Let's pretend we have a Christian school that wants to do this. There's no evidence that Wilberforce Academy exists in any sense except the theoretical. Like you said, Zach Wishart is already principal at River's Edge Christian Academy. So he's already at a private Christian school. He's not like, there's no sign that Wilberforce exists beyond what's in these legal documents. They filed the absolute minimum paperwork that you have to file to say we're going to, or we have the intent of submitting an application for a charter, which that's a short form that you fill out. The real challenge in opening a charter school is in the application itself, which has to be very detailed. You have to have all sorts of plans. Where's the school going to be? What's the management structure? How are you going to accord with state curriculum? I mean, it's hard to do, which is why we don't actually have very many of them in the state. There's only 2 in Knox County right now. And there's just no indication that Wilberforce exists at that level. They haven't submitted that application. So to me, this looks like, a sort of perfunctory gesture to just try to get the thing into court. And do they even have standing to file this lawsuit? Like, that seems like an obvious thing for the county who's having to defend it.
Right, because that was going to be my question on that, Jesse, is that so just in the legal structure of it, like the school doesn't exist because it can't exist or whatever yet, but the school board hasn't done anything yet, so there isn't anything there. When this lawsuit comes in front of a judge, I don't understand what would be other than there's nothing here. Come back when there's something, being the judge's answer to this lawsuit when it gets on his bench, I guess would be the technical term.
Yeah,
that's an obvious defense. I guess we'll see what a judge thinks of it. There are other cases you can find of people who have successfully shown they have standing, but just by saying that basically the thing I want to do won't be allowed under existing rules. And so that's clearly what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, of course, the most of the school board didn't want anything to do with this. I mean, it was just there were 3 votes to ask for a position on the waiver. They need 5. You need 5 to do you think passed? So it didn't pass, and one of the reasons was that Henderson and Triplett both recused themselves because the Wishart is their campaign manager. So, so that wasn't even a discussion. I talked to Henderson earlier in the week. I asked her about that, and first thing out of her mouth was, "I'm not going to vote on it. I'm going to recuse myself." So, okay. So now, the next thing is the county still needs to file its official response to the lawsuit. They were holding off on that. The judge let them, gave them some extra time so they could have this meeting, and the law department could, write their response accordingly. Of course, now it's not going to be included, so that'll be we'll see what what that is when they file it, and it should be just in a very short amount of time. The original deadline, I believe, was Tuesday to have that filed, but like I said, the judge gave them a couple extra days. So, I
do think one thing that's worth pointing out, because I saw some confused discussion of this on social media in terms of what the board was really requesting. And Scott, tell me if I'm misinterpreting this, because you covered the meeting, but my understanding of what they were requesting was a waiver that, if granted, would have allowed Wilberforce to go ahead and file an application for the school board to then consider. They were not requesting that the state grant a charter to Wilberforce, which, that again, there's not even an application yet. There's no way anybody could grant a charter here. Mm-hmm. It was really kind of a technical move to try to push the decision making up the ladder to the state and say, you guys, this is a state law. You guys give us guidance here. And it did not indicate that the board was like asking the state to go ahead and approve.
Oh, no, not at all. In fact, I think that there would be a lot of that would be a tough sell. Like you said, the school board is bound by state law, so they can't, they wouldn't be able to approve it, but the application isn't in. So, and now it can't be in for another year. I mean, that's the thing is they will have to wait a year to actually file one. So, see how that legal mess gets untangled in the coming weeks. In other school related issues, the Governor Bill Lee gave his 8th and final State of the State address, and in it he has proposed, and in his proposed budget, he is proposing to double the size of the school voucher program. You mentioned that earlier. The voucher program provides, tuition, scholarships to cover tuition at private schools, and many of them religious schools. And he wants to go ahead and double the size of the program. Said that they had 54,000 applicants for 20,000 spaces. So he wants to double that 40,000. The one interesting thing that came out too was the state controller's office issued a report on the charter schools and I'm sorry, not charter schools, on the voucher program, and they did something that the State Department of Education has not done, and that's talked about how many kids were getting scholarships through the voucher program who were already in private schools before the program, and only 27% of the students who were getting these voucher scholarships were in public schools, supposedly failing public schools in the previous year. So it's just as we've talked about before, it's benefiting people who already go to private schools. And
and I think that just one qualification on that comptroller's report, because that was looking at the smaller program that Tennessee created first, which was initially limited to Nashville and Memphis. And the state, in setting that one up, they did track where students were coming from, which is why we have that information. In this broader program, which is now we're still in the first year of the universal vouchers across the state, which were available to 20,000 students this year. They're deliberately not collecting that. And so, in the years ahead, we're not going to have that information because they're not asking it at the front end. And that's just clearly on purpose.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of states, or other states that had implemented universal vouchers before Tennessee did, had been tracking that. And those numbers in other states were consistently showing that that's what was happening, which is really what you would expect. People who were already sending their kids to private schools, if you're already doing that and the state says, oh, send us in an application and we'll send you a $7,000 check, who's not going to do that? Of course you're going to do that. And that is what is happening in other states. The Tennessee legislature had the benefit of seeing that happen in other states. And instead of doing maybe what they could have done to limit the program in some way, so that it didn't just become basically a handout to affluent families whose kids are already in private schools. They went the other direction and just concealed that information altogether, which, one of the biggest arguments about vouchers from the beginning has been that, well, this is just mostly going to be a handout to wealthy families whose kids are already in private schools. And that's probably what is going to continue to happen. But we're not going to have good data on it because the state is refusing to tell us, how our tax money is being spent on this.
Yeah, it's astounding to me that they are just stonewalling that, altogether, and that more people aren't demanding to know. We're seeing
as conservatives, nonetheless, like that's one of the pillars of conservatism is, if you're going to take our money in taxes, you're going to make sure you tell us how you spend it. We want to see where it's going.
And there is starting to be some growing hesitancy about that. Not in Tennessee yet, but in Florida now. Florida has the biggest voucher program in the country. They're spending more than 20%. I think it's right at like 23% of their total K-12 budget is going to vouchers now because they expanded it so much so fast. And interestingly, I just read recently that Alabama, which has a voucher program that has some income limits on it, they're planning to take those income limits off their program starting in 2027. There are already Republican legislators in Alabama who are looking at Florida, and they're already saying maybe we don't want to take off these income caps. Tennessee is removing the income caps. Those are, I believe, completely, like this year, half of the vouchers have been income capped, and I think the plan is starting next year, none of them would be. But yeah, like it has an actual cost. There's currently 100,000 students in private schools in Tennessee, or around 100,000. And, you do the math on that. If you're sending $7,000 to each of them, you get up to like $700 million. Like that's a significant chunk. It starts to become a lot. And Tennessee has so far just kind of said, well, don't worry, it's not going to impact public school funding. But like, how can it not? It's all coming out of the same budget, Yeah,
and it's going to be $310 million this year too. So,
right.
If assuming that the legislature approves the budget as is, so and that will be something to watch all through the legislative session too. So.
Just before we come off the state of the state, we've been talking about this the last couple of weeks that I thought was interesting too, is that Governor Lee had asked for, was it an additional $25 million to go into some nuclear programs up here in Oak Ridge? We've been talking about that so much recently. I thought that was just a good tack on top of the stuff we've been talking about in that department.
Yeah, he's wanting to add to the nuclear fund that has, according to the governor's office, has leveraged $8 billion of investment. A lot of that in Oak Ridge and with TVA as well. So that is he is continuing that push to make Tennessee the nation's leader in nuclear power, and so we'll shift gears a little bit here to talk about ambulance response. American Medical Response, AMR, is the county's ambulance provider, and just as recently as a couple of years ago, they had staffing shortages. There were long waiting times to get ambulance service, especially because emergency room waiting times were so long. All kinds of problems. They revamped their contract, and AMR made a big announcement this week that during the year 2025, they hit every single benchmark on that contract. They didn't incur any fines. Their times were within the limits that were set by the contract, and so they Knox County Mayor Glenn Jacobs took some credit for fashioning the contract the way it is to give AMR incentive to improve things. And they made some changes. One of the things that they did is they started a nurse navigator program where call into 911. This nurse navigator will basically diagnose you and in some ways prevent you from going to the ER because most of the calls for ambulances end up not really needing to go to the ER, but if an ambulance responds and picks somebody up, they've got to go to an ER. So the Nurse Navigator program, about 2,500 calls have gone through the Nurse Navigator, and that's 2,500 ER visits that theoretically have been avoided. So so AMR has really improved its performance, which of course is good for the public.
Did they have any information about the impact of their efforts specifically around the homeless service agencies on North Broadway? Because I know that's an area that they have been looking at to try to limit the number of times they respond down there, just because it is it's a disproportionate part of their calls.
Yeah, 4% of all the ambulance calls in the county are just right there at Broadway, and they are making some progress there. One of the things that's helped there is not really an AMR thing, but it's there is a medical clinic now at CARM, at Knox Area Rescue Ministry, and so instead of an ambulance call and going to an ER, people who are in that area who are homeless can go and get some care there. And so if they're not, if it's not a life-threatening situation, they won't have to call an ambulance. So I know that's the county is really hoping that will pay dividends as well. So.
And what about the issue of wait times at hospitals? That was the other big thing, especially coming out of the pandemic. There was a lot of talk about hospitals being understaffed and ambulances, they call it wall time, just kind of having to wait there to discharge their patients.
Yeah, well, it's better. One of the things is there's increased capacity at the emergency departments. UT Medical Center just opened up a new one. The nurse navigators diverting calls to ERs helps as well, because it's the fewer patients, the shorter the wait time. So it's that is improving, and that is that wasn't I guess the evidence there is that they didn't get fined by the county for being late. So that's an improvement, especially over the pandemic experience. That was if you don't really need to have a long memory to remember what that was like in with the emergency rooms, and so anyway, AMR is moving into the next year of that contract, and we'll see if they can keep their winning streak going. So, and also this is something that Jesse, you've been following, is the Representative Gino Bulso has filed a couple of culture warrior bills. So talk a little bit about what those are.
Yeah, Gino Bulso, Republican from Brentwood, one of the most culturally conservative representatives in the state legislature, which is saying something, because there are a lot of culturally conservative Republicans in the state legislature. He's filed a bunch of bills, and picked a couple to focus on this week just because they moved out of subcommittees. Because, a lot of bills get filed at the beginning of every session, and it's hard to know at the front end, like which ones have any likelihood of making it all the way to the floor, never mind becoming law. But when a bill moves out of subcommittee, as both of these did, with unanimous support from the Republican members of the subcommittees, which means both of these bills are going to go to the full House Judiciary Committee. That's a sign that there's some support for them, and they may well move all the way through. So these two bills in particular, one of them has been flagged by the Tennessee Equality Project, which is the major LGBTQ advocacy group in the state, because it looks like, it's basically a shot at the Obergefell decision, the Supreme Court decision in 2015 that legalized gay marriage nationwide, basically said you can't discriminate on the basis of sex when it comes to issuing and recognizing marriage licenses. And, Bulso says that this isn't intended as a direct challenge to Obergefell, and I think that's right, because the bill explicitly says that it recognizes that Obergefell was decided and it has established these limits that that basically states cannot refuse to issue marriage licenses, public entities cannot refuse to recognize same-sex marriages. But the bill says that doesn't apply to private individuals or organizations, that basically private individuals and organizations are not required to recognize same-sex marriages. It's a little unclear what that means. Like, what does it mean for a private individual to not recognize somebody else's marriage? I don't really know. For an organization, like, you could kind of think of, my big question about it is if it has any implication for things like private employers offering insurance plans. Does this somehow mean that if you offer insurance to your employees, and a lot of employers will offer, family plans to people, married couples, children, and so forth, like, does it mean that you could say, I don't recognize your marriage, therefore your partner is not eligible for coverage? I don't know. There was discussion of it at the subcommittee, and when he was asked, like, what does this change, Bulso said it doesn't change anything. It just reaffirms existing law, state and federal law, which then it raises the question, like, why are you doing it? So maybe the answer is just to kind of reassure people that, like, if you still want to personally be against gay marriage, you still can be, even though it has to be legally recognized. I don't know, but it has alarmed LGBTQ advocates, just in the sense that it seems to be continuing to try to push and find ways to fence in and limit the impact of the Obergefell decision, and to still kind of try to maintain some sense that there's a difference between same-sex marriages and what they're calling traditional marriages. It may not even be specific enough to generate a legal challenge, because it's unclear that it really facilitates any direct action. It might just be kind of like we just want to put it on the record that we still don't like gay people. I don't know. Another bill, though, that also moved out of subcommittee has a little more oomph to it, and it is aimed at promoting freedom of religion, respecting freedom of religion in public schools. Of course, public schools have been sort of an endless battleground over religious expression, whether it can be, the Supreme Court in a whole series of cases over many decades, kind of struck down things like mandatory school prayer. We don't have those anymore. Can you have a school prayer? Can you have a prayer read over the PA system at a football game? Well, no. So there have been various limits put in. This bill basically argues that, it makes a lot of arguments about constitutional history, and it picks up a thread of argument that's been popular on the religious right for at least the past few decades, that basically says that the whole idea of separation of church and state is, first of all, not grounded in the Constitution because it doesn't exactly say that, although it does say Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So I don't think that's that vague, but there are people who read that to not mean that there shouldn't be government involvement in religion. It's also arguing that a lot of our modern ideas about separation of church and state is rooted in anti-Catholic bias, that a lot of this came out of people in the 19th and early 20th centuries who were alarmed by the growing number of Catholic immigrants in the country. And I mean, as recently as when John F. Kennedy was elected president in 1960, there was this anti-Catholic animus that was based in the idea that, oh, well, he's going to be taking his orders from the Pope, that this is the danger of Catholics, is that they're not ever loyal to any country, they're only loyal to the church. That kind of anti-Catholic prejudice is much, much less present now in this country than it was then. But there's this argument that, well, this is where this whole idea of the separation of church and state came from, and therefore the whole idea is, invalid, and states and public schools funded by states should not be held accountable to that standard, that it's basically a constitutional misinterpretation. So it's got that kind of like long-winded introduction in the bill. The only things the bill really establishes is that it would actually right now you can already teach the Bible in Tennessee schools, and plenty of Tennessee schools do offer Bible-based courses. They have to be non-evangelical. You can't be proselytizing. You can't present it as this is the word of God, and if you don't believe it, you're going to hell. But you can teach it as a historical document, as a piece of literature, as a basis for Western civilization. Those classes right now in the schools that offer them are electives, and you can take them if you want to. This bill would make them mandatory. Every school at every level, K-12, would be responsible for teaching the Bible to students, and it lays out all the things you're supposed to teach about the Bible and the history of Israel. And you could opt a student out of this, but it would change the default from right now, these classes are only offered as electives. You take them if you want. This would make it the default that you would have to opt your student out of. And, there's a big difference between opt-in and opt-out. The issue that often gets raised with like these kinds of opt-out requirements is that the students who did opt out, might feel peer pressure. They might feel weird, like you're the kid who has to leave the room when we talk about this. In my elementary school, there was a Jehovah's Witness girl in my grade school class. She left the classroom every morning when we did the Pledge of Allegiance because Jehovah's Witnesses, did not believe in pledging allegiance to the country. They pledge allegiance to God. And we all knew it. We all noticed. And I don't know that anybody treated her badly as a result of that, but she certainly stood out. And so those would be the kinds of concerns with something that would require basically the non-Christian kids are all going to get up and leave the classroom or something. So that's one thing the bill does. And then it would also expand the kinds of prayers that could be offered and who could lead those prayers and that kind of thing. And this bill, unlike the Obergefell bill, does seem like it has some intent of maybe generating a lawsuit that they could take through the court system to our conservative Supreme Court, hoping for an expansion of the kinds of religious expression and instruction that can take place in public schools. There's a phrase in the bill that says the state legislature is interested, or the state of Tennessee is interested in making sure that we're following the First Amendment correctly and offering opportunities for court instruction and guidance. So, this one does seem to be aimed at maybe pushing, we're seeing this in red states across the country right now, because we have this very conservative Supreme Court that's shown a real willingness, in some cases enthusiasm, for revisiting prior decisions. And so sort of every conservative interest group that has been aggrieved by Supreme Court decisions in the last 75 years is now trying to push cases up to challenge a whole bunch of different things. And, create a new, much more conservative, and certainly in this case, much more religiously oriented and very specifically Christian oriented set of rules and guidances. And this is explicitly Christian. This only talks about the Bible. It doesn't say that, it says you have to teach the Bible. It does not say anything about the Quran. It doesn't say anything.
Not comparative religion. So,
right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that'll be those bills and plenty of others to track through the legislature in the coming weeks, and that's pretty much all we were planning to talk about that happened last week. Although lots more happened last week, and we covered it in Compass. For example, there were a couple of things that happened in the urban wilderness. The Gateway Park opened. And then the Rails to Trails project is underway. They're ripping up rails in South Knoxville for the new Art Walk and Greenway between Kern's Bakery and Imes Nature Center. So, and there were plenty of other things that we covered as well. So, if you go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe there, you can get that in your. We have an email newsletter that comes in your inbox every morning during the week, and then also longer stories on our website. So check us out there. Coming up this week, we do have a couple of meetings of public bodies that we'll be taking a look at. The Juvenile Service Center Board is meeting at 2:00 on Tuesday at Juvenile Court. Of course, we've talked about the Juvenile Service Center, seems like every week for the last 6 months or so as it's being reformed. And one of the things, in fact, they'll talk about is the proposal to have the juvenile court judge, who's currently Tim Irwin, oversee the management of the service center. Originally, they were going to get the sheriff's department to do it. Now they're going to be asking the county commission to authorize the juvenile court judge to do that. They're going to be putting together the nuts and bolts of that on Tuesday. Then also on Thursday, 1:30 p.m. in the main assembly room of the city county building, the Knoxville-Knox County Planning Commission will meet, and they've got an extensive agenda of land use issues and rezonings and those kinds of things. So we'll pluck out some of the more interesting ones to cover next week. So and then who knows what else will come up. So that's one of the great things about news is sometimes you just don't know and things fall in your lap.
I'm going to get on the Kelshi and I'm going to bet snow for next week just because I'm sure the odds are long. But knowing Knoxville, we'll get some snow next week.
Well, we could. Well, it's supposed to get cold again this weekend, maybe some flurries. So, but then first next week is supposed to be in the mid-50s or something.
It's supposed to warm up pretty quick.
Yep. So we'll be catching up with Jesse down there in New Orleans since he's warm down there. Anyway, that's it for this week. Thank you, Lord Seth Barber, for your work. We also thank Will Wright for the music. For the program. Jesse, enjoy your time in New Orleans.
Thanks, I will. It's hard not to enjoy your time in New Orleans.
That is definitely true. It's been way too long for me. It's been many years since I've been to New Orleans. I love the city. So, but enjoy yourself down there. And folks, we'll be back next week with another edition of Compass Points.
CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.